Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Nuggets of Wisdom. For those of you that are new to our podcast, welcome. For our returning viewers, thank you for tuning in again. Today, we will be taking you on a soul-warming journey with Zeina. My wonderful Zeina recently completed her master's thesis titled Journeys of the Spirit, comparing Plato's Republic and Tufayl Ibn Yaqzan, where you looked into how a spiritual journey can bring about an understanding of the divine. So Zeina, before you take
I'm not that smart in real life.
She is. I want to read a snippet of your thesis before we begin delving into, this soul journey that you went on with these two cherished texts. You said everyone has her own path and journey, and our destination is the same, but how we seek it differs from one person to the next. Seeking the truth requires a deepening of awareness that finally leads to the moment of insight. No matter how close that truth may be, some people will accept their shackles and chains rather than seek the key that opens a new stage of life. With this, Zeina, I want to ask you, how did you come about selecting these two personalities or teachings to focus your thesis on?
That's a good question. I don't know, just how I came about picking these topics was a bit weird. I knew that I wanted to do something with Plato, especially the Republic, because I fell in love with the allegory of the cave. I fell in love with it, the idea behind it, and the way of someone breaking free and breaking all these boundaries in order to reach a higher level of awareness. And accidentally, I stumbled upon Hayy Ibn Yaqzan, but by my professor, and he's like, you should check it out. And I did, and I fell in love with it. And ever since then, I felt like these two worked really well together for me, because they're both talking about people who started from point A and reached point B in their awareness. So I felt like there's a pattern here about being free, especially when regarding an allegory of the kings. So this is why it came about.
I love that. Zeina, could you just tell us a little bit about Tufayl Ibn Yaqzan? He's a Sufi mystical figure who went on a spiritual journey. Who is he?
All right. According to my little research, Hayy Ibn Yaqzan was actually a story that was featured in another Sufist writer. I think it was Al-Ghazali, I'm not sure. I think so. And it was like a myth, more or less. I think the idea of him was a myth, like a mythical story. And Ibn Tufayl took that. He wrote that story and recorded. And what's it called? And what really amazed me about Ibn Tufayl is the fact that he was so educated when he came about it. And the beginning of the book shows. I'm babbling on about, but Ibn Tufayl was a very educated person when it comes to the different types of research and the education that he got, which for me was mind-blowing for someone that mindful and that knowledgeable to come with a very fantastical, very out of the world story, more or less, even the idea behind it, which I loved.
Okay, so you selected these teachings to try to understand, the beauty of the soul, or how human beings go about a spiritual journey, or to show that the journey of self-discovery or spiritual journey tends to have the same steps, or we tend to evolve in a similar fashion. What did you want to achieve with, through delving into this research?
Other than the stress of wanting to finish my thesis, I just wanted to prove to I just wanted the idea of someone, again, I'm not gonna stress these enough, but for me, the idea of someone reaching that awareness through a simple matter of observation, which is found in both, was for me like a mind-blowing thing. And I think even on our like part of our religious practice, it has to do a lot with observation. And I've never like the connection between the mind and the heart was something that like I made this connection after reading these two texts, because I felt like you'll never be able to fully observe, like to fully be one with the world, unless your mind is accepting of what they see around it. So the mind has to reach, and this acceptance of the world has to be done through observation, and a heavy one, like a heavy observation, what's going on in your world and how do you feel about it, even inwards, in order to become one with the world, I guess, or reach that awareness, if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, and it ties into, you know, our previous podcasts where we did talk about that mental journey that people go on, or that journey,
Yeah.
From the mind to being fully aware and present in the heart.
Yeah.
So with this, I want you, to just take us through the soul, Zeina. Take us through your research. What is a good and a bad soul? How do they define an evil soul? And how does a soul purify itself to, reaching that higher state of awareness and to be connected with the divine?
Okay. I think we could use Plato for that. So Plato basically, I'll just leave it like that. Plato basically identified the souls and what drives each soul. And more or less, like for Plato, the soul is something that is purely good. This is how the end result of the good soul, something that's purely good, meaning what? Like it would naturally do good because it is good, not because it's bad. And with no reward. So it's good because I know that it's good. So I'm like helping out other people because it is the good thing to do. And this is like the ultimate good soul for him. And he started like within the first books and like the first chapters that he talked about. He spoke, like he had this big debate about what makes a good soul. So this for him was at the end of the day, like a good soul is a soul that, like does good for good. But he also identified the soul as three parts. I think the part that has to do with appetite, and this and this has to do with your wants and needs. There's also a mindful, so like a soul that works through the mind. And I'm not sure of the last one. I really can't remember because I wrote it under a stressful situation. But I think the third one was he called it the assertive or the passionate one, like something like that. I think along these lines.
So the first two are the ones that are materialistic. They're focused on the physical, materialistic world. They do things to please the people around them.
No, it's not. No, it's not about that. No. It's about like he said like we have the mind, body, and spirit. Mm-hmm. He's like he identify like the soul. He identify like what makes a person is like his appetitive soul. His what's it called? His the mind soul, the mind, like a soul that thinks too much, like the thinking wise, or like the one that is too passionate. I think if I can't, memory can't help me remember it for whatever it is. So he had these three parts of the soul, and he said like you'll only find balance unless these three things are more or less balanced. So if you're thinking too much, that's great. And that means your brain is always working and you're thinking about these great ideas and all these things. But at the same time, you're disregarding the other two. So that means more or less you're focused on one thing. And this is for him is not healthy, which kind of translates to today. For example, when you think about too much, then you go into this anxious mode. And you're not grounded anymore, and you feel like you go sometimes into this fantastical land. While if you're focusing on your body too much, it kind of more or less goes into the part of, well, you're not taking part of your mind and your soul and your emotions through the inside. And if you're thinking too much with your emotions, then you're not going to make sound judgments. So he said, like more or less, these you can have one overshadowing a little bit. but not to the point you're taking full over, like not to be a Sherlock or not to be like a Johnny Bravo or like whatever it is that you might have. So I think, did I make it clear?
Yeah, you did. So it's basically, so the soul is innately good, but it has these three features kind of. And and one overshadows the other.
Yeah, and for him, this is a part one of the good soul, like more or less they're in balance. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I lean towards the thinking with my mind, but I'm not disregarding the other two.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the first thing. Second thing, I connect this with the theory of the forms, and Plato came up with something called the theory of the forms. So, or this is my vision towards it, and based on my reading, I came to this conclusion. So, according to Plato, everything in this world is not coming straight from the divine. Whatever the divine, like he believed in one divine, unlike the other Greek philosophers who believed, and poets who believed in multiple gods and goddesses. So for him, like there was one divine, and we all get connected back to him, more or less. Mm-hmm. So he viewed like the bad soul, like more or less as like, let's go back to the theory of the form. So everything in this world is not as it seems, like it's not straight from the divine, for example, or it's not like what it is in the divinely world. For example, we have this, for example, a tree. All right, this tree, no matter like this tree, even though it came straight out of heaven, but it's not, or like the divinely order, whatever he viewed it as, but it's still not coming from the original source, because we still don't know what the original source is. And the problem,
explain that a little bit.
All right, so let's go back to let's imagine the world just being created right now.
So is it like, you mean our perceptions alter it? It's how we view it, how you view your reality? Like, what do you mean?
No. This is like for everyone. So for example, we're the first people on Earth, mm-hmm. and we saw the tree. I saw like a full grown tree. All right. And so this tree, we assume it was made by the creator, right? Yeah. So he said, like, even this tree, like the first direct contact with the divine is still not what it seems in the divine world.
Okay. Wow. This is very philosophical. Yeah.
I know. So bear with me. So it gets more philosophical. Now, his main problem is that, well, I decided to make another tree, like an apple instead. Mm-hmm. I'm not the one that created it, but like, more or less, I'm the one who built it. All right. And then not only that, Lulu took my imitation of the original tree, quote unquote original, because it's not really original according to Plato. And you took the imitation of my tree, and you made another tree. And then our family and cousins and friends came in and took like our imitation and made their own thing. So his problem is that the more that we step away from the divine regarding the forms, is more or less a problematic thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Am I clear on that?
Making more sense, yeah.
Okay, because I'm sweating over here. Okay, so this is like the second thing regarding Plato. Also, so yeah, basically this is what makes a good soul. A soul, like going like is not manipulated by worldly things, and at the same time is still more or less deepened within its roots, like the original roots.
Yeah. Wow.
And more or less its parts are in balance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is, I think, your question was what makes a good soul.
What makes a good and an evil soul? Yeah.
Okay.
So does he go into or discuss the steps that human beings go into to eventually evolve to that good soul, or do human beings sometimes not transition, go from a bad soul to a good soul, then to a bad soul in some situation? Like what I don't know if my
yeah, I get your question. Yeah. How do we break that? How can we make a bad soul into a good one?
Yeah.
First of all, I disagree with Plato, or there's no good soul or bad soul. They're just experiences that make us who we are. Like, in the eyes of God, I think we're the last people to judge a soul, more or less. But let's entertain this idea with, for him, he kind of hinted that towards his, he didn't say it per se, he should do this. He created an entire city in order to preserve the souls of the people, and not let what's it called, even though it could be more or less a bit rigid, but more or less the aim was to protect the souls of the people. But he hinted towards that with the allegory of the cave.
Mm-hmm.
The allegory of the cave, who people were not familiar with, it's just about this story. I think he created. I think it was he said it. According to this story goes as such as in imagine a cave, and in this cave you see people are shackled, and the only thing they're viewing is a wall. They're seeing a wall, and in this wall you see you see the light, and this light is reflecting shadows on the wall that they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So one person, and they believe that these shadows are the real thing. They believe it's the real thing, and this is what they see constantly, and this is what they learn from. However, one person, his shackles get loose for whatever reason. And he starts to even though it's dark, but he starts to take a look around and observe what's going about. And as he's observing, he goes out of the cave all of a sudden, and while he's observing, he's taking his steps, and he goes out of the cave. And he saw the light for the first time. This is where he opened his eyes, he saw the light, mm-hmm. and I love how they say it took him a while to adjust to the light since he was in darkness all this time. However, once he was able to see, he saw that it was so beautiful, but only few people were there. And he knew that the people who are walking outside were the source of the shadows that people were seeing. Mm-hmm. So they're he saw, he knew for a fact that now these shadows are fake and they're not the real thing.
So it's showing in a way that awareness, it's a very slow and a gradual process.
More or less, but it is based on, exactly, and it's based on observation. It's based on, because the guy, he got his shackles away, mm-hmm. and he used this idea of breaking free of observing. He started to observe the cave around him. He started to find a way out through observing, and he went out. And once he went out, he transcended into this light, this awareness. You were gonna take it symbolism line. But yeah, he saw this awareness, and he saw he experienced it. But he ended it very pessimistically, which I also disagree with, because I hate the fact that he when he came back and to warn the people around him, they refused it so much, to the point that they killed him, or so. I think he ended up dead because of them. They completely disagreed with him, and he tried to break them free of the shackles, but they didn't want to, and he tried to convince them that the shadows are real, and they didn't want to see it, and he ended up him being killed. And I read this, I don't like this, because I do get sometimes when people are connected deeply to something. Sometimes it's very hard, no matter if it's positive or negative, but sometimes it's very hard to break them free. But at the same time, if you feel like it is your job to let people be aware, it's not important to give up on them. But yeah,
but I mean, Zeina, it's kind of, I do see where he's going with it. I mean, obviously,
I know
this teaching is because, it's the journey of self-discovery. It's your journey, and the awareness that you reach, that's yours, and it's uniquely yours. It's not your job to you can guide people, but to kind of, not force
them
to see the awareness that you saw, or to reach that awareness that you've reached. And this is kind of like related to that change that some people can't change, or it's not your job to change some people. And sometimes
exactly
that. Is this where you know where you kind of were going with this when you were talking about intention?
No, for me, I hated the pessimism of like not a lot of people could change, and if they were felt threatened, they might like go against you. And I do get your point of view, be like, yeah, like some people going, especially any change that they go through, sometimes it's not really accepted by those around them, and sometimes people around them might find a harder time to accept the situation. But like you said, it's a personalized journey, and we shouldn't let it be labeled by someone else or label it for other people as well. It is your journey. Yeah.
No, it's making me think of a lot of things that, you know,
I know
if you're changing for the sake of other people or to try to also, you know, make people change their perception, you're kind of deviating from your original intentions as to why you decided to go on that journey in the first place. So I'm digressing, you know, from your thesis topic, but this is kind of what I was able to pull from his section, from the where you looked into Plato's Republic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're too.
No, it's very fascinating, to be honest, because I'm just trying, as I was reading your thesis, I'm just trying to think of, you know, right now, the world that we live in right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, Zeina, that before we start talking about Ibn Tufayl, it's actually harder to go on a spiritual journey right now than before, than the world that they were living in? Less distractions, no.
But keep in mind when, all right,
or is human nature
Plato had
same?
to. That's a good question, because Plato wrote this when he, like, the world around him were believing in gods and goddesses, you know? And like, even if you read the first parts, he like went head to head with like one of the like high merchants, and like the main point of him was he saw like Greece was a corrupt city for him, like for him, like he viewed it as a corrupt city. It's only there by more not by morality, but views. And he spoke about heavily on translating to media today, and how it is the main soul to blame for that heavy, like that what's it called, that translation of what makes a good person, what makes a bad person, or what is a good thing and what is a bad thing. So now with this global interaction and instant feedback and instant everything that's instant right now, it is hard. But at the same time, if you want it, it's there. That's the magic of it. If you really want it, like just like magic, if you want it, it will appear to you. Which is why like for me, the spiritual journey, I consider it as Hogwarts, because once you really need it, it's gonna appear to you, more or less. And if you need to get to know yourself was always there with you. If you want to know your God is always there, you know. So it is right in front of you, but it's just you need to observe it first. And this is why that's connecting it to Hayy Ibn Yaqzan. Do you want me to continue, or do you want me to elaborate even more?
No, take us through Ibn Tufayl.
All right. Ibn Tufayl starts his story by saying, like, this road is pretty tough. And if you want to seek it from the beginning. He was like, and yeah, if you want to seek it, you need to seek it diligently. And I quote him exactly with that. And so he started us with like, hey guys, okay? And he wrote this to the reader, basically. He's like, I'm writing this to you because I knew that you're interested in finding that spiritual awakening. And of course, he's talking more about from Islamic point of view, but it is like, but I do believe like it is an awareness, like I tend to apply this even to my, like, if I want to reach like a knowledge, I want to research something, like even to the basics of things. If I want to learn a new thing, like, because the main point of this was more of educational. point of view, how to make someone learn from step A and step B, and also could be more like how to understand the soul and the world, because at the end of the day, it's all learning. It's a learning process. So he started by saying, "Hey guys, listen up. This is a tough time. This is a tough journey. And if you want to do it, you have to seek it. And it's not for everyone." He started like it's alphabet. He starts with that. And then he starts to talk about it a little more, like, is the spiritual awakening and what is it to be like spiritually aware. And he states like it's a journey, like it's a place or a level where if you to God and so connected to his world and his creatures, and more or less like this state of euphoria, more or less. However, he also said like, hey, you need to be aware, because if you reach this state without any proper education, without any proper, like he's talking more about specifically knowing God specifically, but you can apply this to everywhere. You might understand like a mathematical equation, but if you still don't know 1 + 1, you might have a harder time accomplishing it. So more or less, this is where he's going with that. So he gave us a step, like through Hayy, you can see the steps of awakening, more or less. Hayy starts by being himself as an animal. And he starts off with like the idea of, he starts by saying like, some people say that he was born from a tree, and some people say like, because it's the Mediterranean island, I think he called it the tree of Waqwa. I don't know if there's a translation of it in English, but yeah. And some people say that he was actually birthed from his mom, but due to the fact that her brother did not agree of her husband, and he was a king, so she had to and hide it, which more or less is a very much allegorical to a lot of prophet stories, and like you're gonna see it a lot in this story. So he starts, before he goes deep in the story, he goes by saying, like, not everyone is born spiritually awake. And if you're lucky, if you are. And he stresses very highly on that. Like, I hope by the end of this journey, you realize, like, this is what, how to go through a spiritual awakening and how to know it. But more or less, like, not everyone is born with spiritual sight. And not everyone is called it from the awliya, like those highly spiritual people. Not everyone's born like that. But if you are not born, you have to sharpen your mind. You have to rest on that. Sharpen your mind by like being more knowledgeable about this, like physics and astronomy and history and a lot of these things.
That's interesting. So it kind of like helps you not set the foundation, but widen your perspective a little bit. So when you go through that higher level of awareness, you're still grounded in a way. You don't go through that shock phase.
Exactly. Yeah. And he used the metaphor by Ibn Ghazali, I think, in which I think we covered it in our podcast before about the blind person and how when he finally saw the light, he knows he's not as confused because he studied the streets names and he studied his turns. So when he finally saw light, it was easier for him to adjust. And I think this is very important because I personally used it when I personally went through this. I'm not saying like I'm spiritually aware, but like more of emotionally wise understanding myself. I feel like in this moment, because I'm not saying like there were times when I didn't realize what was going on in my emotions. So I needed to educate myself in my emotions in order to understand and observe their patterns. So for example, you tend to drink Pepsi Diet when you tend to be overwhelmed. So this is an educational observation on my part. And so when it happens again, or when I finally open up my eyes, it will be easier to get rid of it.
Okay, so he emphasizes, observation is really crucial and essential as part of your and it's something that you need to continue holding on to in your journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening.
Yeah. And it's by choice. You have to choose to be, you want to be educated, you know, and like
elaborate more on
like,
that,
because I'm a teacher, right? And not every student in the world is interested in what I'm saying, sadly. Like, they're not interested in the subject. And I think more or less right now, a lot of people are going into this phase of, we don't want to, like, why I have my internet, and should I learn? Why do I need teachers? And why do I need to educate myself? And more or less they're forced, and I can't blame them. They don't find, like, in the old times, I think, based, like, up until like our grandparents, more or less, they were not really forced to work. Like, they were not forced to educate, like, go to school. Like, it was not a mandatory thing to make or break you, more or less. Mm-hmm. But right now, education is becoming a necessity in order to succeed in life. Back then, it wasn't. So the choice, like, I want to purely educate myself for myself in order to reach a higher level of awareness. I don't know.
Caveat it like that you're learning it for you. It's an investment in you, in your journey of self-discovery.
Exactly.
For you to adjust your lens towards you. So it's the two types of education. Like you said, the fields like astronomy or whatever it is, what field that you're interested in, but also educate yourself in ways that will help you, you know, in that observation process, or to identify patterns that you need to break within you.
Yeah, because I believe, like all roads lead back to God, and, like, you have to put this intention while you're getting an education. Like, I want to get to know myself and my God better. So whatever you're doing, no matter if it's a painting class or a or a philosophy class, or just a book that you're reading, a nonfiction book or a fiction book that you're reading. Even if sometimes right now I do it and it seems stupid, but even when I'm playing a game, like, I would just, like, intend, like, I come up with something out of it to help me get to know myself better. And I'm not saying, like, I don't know if it's wrong or right, but I feel like getting to know yourself will help you get to know God more. And I don't know, like, in this path, because He's the one that created you. So I feel like you have to get to know yourself and appreciate it in order to understand what is it that you're given, you know, and be really thankful. Like, my God, was I blessed with Zeina?
And I think, Zeina, you repeatedly say this to me every time I share something with you. You're like, it's all about the intention. Make sure you set it in.
Yeah.
And I love that, because it kind of does connect everything that you do to a higher purpose, a higher reason, a higher life purpose. So it does give you momentum in a way to keep going, to continue. That you're not doing these things just for, even playing a game or reading a book, for momentarily.
You have to be and you have to be very careful with picking it. It has to, because in order for the intention to work, hint, what's it called? I'm not saying, like, hey, at the end of the day, it's God's will. Like, I'm not saying, like, this is 100% will work, but it needs to, you need to really feel it, and it really should be representing, like, it should represent who you are currently. It's very, very important for it. Like, you need to,
who you are,
like, for example,
No, just what do you mean by?
So, for example, I'm just giving it very basically. I'm not, like, kind of find an elite metaphor for that. But, like, imagine that you like a strawberry cheesecake, right? You love, like, your favorite dessert in the world is strawberry cheesecake. But your intention was, like, I want to find a chocolate cheesecake instead of a strawberry one. But you like the strawberry cheesecake, and it's who you are, and it's going purely for you. But you tend to choose the chocolate cheesecake. So make sure that your intentions is you have to be very aware of yourself in order to bullseye with the intention. Maybe it will work, maybe it isn't, but in order for it to work like an on and off switch. First of all, you have to make sure that it's completely rid of, like, I'm doing, like, because I always did this a lot. like I'm just gonna find an example. Like I'm gonna read, not because I love reading, but because the other people read this book and they loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, like, my intention with this reading, what's it called, is not to show and to show the other people that I'm a bit smart with my book choices. So you have to be
people pleasing. We all fall into that trap, yeah.
More or less. But you're cutting yourself short for that, because you genuinely love reading, and your intent to, like, for example, my intention was to read more. There was a specific intention in my life where I wanted to read more, but it wasn't really pure, because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm not doing it purely for myself. Like, I'm not like, I don't want to work. I mean, I don't want to read because I want to read. Mm-hmm. I want to read because maybe it will help me educate myself more with what's going on around me. But maybe I'm not, like, my soul's not interested in that. It's interested more on the actual reading process rather than rather than knowing what's going on in the world, mm-hmm. or to be more knowledgeable.
Then it seems that Ibn Tufayl has a more optimistic view towards the soul and the human nature, right? No? I misread that part of your thesis. Okay. Why is that?
All right, I'll tell you. So after he goes, like, we went off point a little bit with intention, but after he set up the reader, like, hey, this is it. Not everyone could reach the stage, but hey, if you've reached it, that's great for you. 2 thumbs up. And he got Hayy Ibn Yaqzan, and which I don't know why, my theory is that he gave 2 versions of the story, because one representing the heart and one representing the mind. Like the tree, being birthed of a tree of the waqfa goes into this, like, surrendering heart point of view, like, if this is it, this is it, while the mind needs to have a logical story of how this baby came about. So he goes into Hayy, and he starts with the animal kingdom. Like, because he was raised by a doe alone in this world, he goes into viewing himself as a doe as well, like this deer, more or less. And he starts to behave like these animals and understand their point of view and knows how to talk their language. Up until this moment, he had no contact with the world, more like Tarzan, more or less. I was gonna go Tarzan, but so he goes into that more or less point of view of, like, this narrative of Hayy being okay with being like, because he didn't know better, and he was so focused in that world that he, like, to the point that he created his own fur in order to become like one of the animals, because he's different. All these cool animals where like have these furs, but I don't. And he started to like made his laws. So more or less, he started to have this viewpoint of he still didn't view himself as human. He didn't know what human is. He just viewed himself as the other animals, and he thought that was normal. Up until he hits with his mother death. And this is where we truly see Hayy's journey manifesting itself with the observation. So he was so shocked. Like, this is his first trigger of going into awareness. Like, he's very his doe, which he viewed as his mother, died. And he started to observe, but she didn't, she died of natural causes. But he viewed her why did she die? And he started to observe this question. She was fine. The other, he started to compare her to the other animal by his observation, stated well, the other animal seems to be dead because they have a cut or they have a wound around them, on their body. And this is why they tend to, he observed, he connected that with that. But he never saw an animal dying of natural causes. So, which made him go into an observation even more, in which he went into this killing spree of killing all the animals, because he wanted to see he knew that his mom's this is his mom's body, and he why isn't he there? And he started to have these questions why isn't he? Why whatever the reason, he started to kill all these kill a bunch of animals and carve them from the inside in order to see what's going on, or why aren't they moving? And he after this experiment, he came up with his own observation and conclusion, in which he said, like, I think what controls the human, or what is human, or what controlled my mom was the heart. Because the moment he opened the heart, he saw steam coming out of it. So he knew, especially with his fresh, like those he killed automatically and carved them on the spot, he saw that there's steam coming out of it. So he felt more, and it was still warm. So he thought that maybe because of this, the soul is leaving the body. He started to make this observation. Mm-hmm. Then he goes into this rampage of what is the soul, and he noticed in his like he started to make all these observations up until he understood what the soul is. I'm not going to go into details because it's a very interesting story and encourage everyone to read it. But he goes into this viewpoint. He starts to go, what is a soul? And he starts now to even his view of himself starts to change. He starts now, instead of becoming an animal, he starts to use them for his own benefit, which is like he's going into the law, like the natural law, more or less.
So he's using the animal, or transcending from that mental mind state slowly to the heart soul,
a higher one. Yeah. Okay. And his actions are even changing. Mm-hmm. Like he's not interacting with the other animals because he feels like this is not who he is right now, which could be a symbol for many things. And not only that, he starts to use the animals for his reason, like for his own benefit. He starts to, like, for example, use horses for like going about, and he starts, instead of feeling helpless, he starts to make his own tools and his own things to help him out. Mm-hmm. And then we see the next step in which he discovered fire, and with fire he discovered food, and how he can, like, he goes into this another physical journey in which he's taking care of him, like his physical self. And then through the connection, he starts to classify the souls, in which he classified that there's a soul for the plants and there's a soul for the kingdom. And he viewed himself as a soul, but he doesn't know what it is yet. He doesn't know, like, he's never seen a human before. Mm-hmm. So he knows that with all these connections, more or less, they're connected to one thing, to one being. No, like, in which he connected it to God. And once he reached the state, he starts to eating less and less. Like his body, it didn't require much food anymore. Like he's just eating the basics in order to automatically enrich his soul.
Wow. So because he was becoming more spiritually aware, he stopped being dependent on like physical substance. Wow.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Like he stopped because he already went through the motion, more like more or less. But we saw that his food intake now is he's only eating what really needs, rather than overeating. And he viewed that as a way to be less grounded. Like, yeah, it is grounded, but not like before. Mm-hmm. So up until he reaches this awareness. Once he reached this awareness, he started to see, we saw this character coming in called Absal, I think. I think in Arabic is called Absal or Asad, because it had like a weird name. So he goes into meeting Absal, and with Absal, Absal starts now to teach him language, which is another key point in the steps. He starts to teach him language and how to speak, and they go into the city themselves. And this city are Muslims, but they're not, like, they're following the very right, because they view like the laws of Islam are as laws that more or less are constricting. So they want to make more or less to find any way out. Mm-hmm. Translating to today, just like the kids who's focusing on their, like, you're giving them an assignment and they're focused too much on the assignment. Is it due tomorrow? Like, is it due tomorrow? If it's due tomorrow, can I make it tomorrow afternoon? Is it like tomorrow? Like, when exactly the time of tomorrow? So they go into very specific, like unnecessary specific details, forgetting the original source, which is your divine, like your connection with God. Mm-hmm. So so they go into the city and they start to help people out and be like, hey, listen up. Like, this is like, religion is not about that. It's also about your connection to God and how you view the world. And you need to make sure that it stays as pure as possible. However, they were not, like, based on what they're saying, they were not really welcome. So they had to go back to their city. Again, another pessimistic view in which they stayed together up until, like, they went back to the island, the one where Hayy was in, which is another very pessimistic view. Because, like you said, if you force, because everyone, like you said, has their individualized journey, and you don't like the biggest learning stuff that I've, like, the very biggest learning thing is it's not for me to judge who's right and who's wrong, because I just need to focus on myself, because I'm not gonna judge, like, I don't know the end result of this guy, even my intentions. Like, don't even judge your actions. Like, don't say, like, I prayed today 5 times and I'm good to go, because I fall into this trap. Like, yeah, I pray and I fast and I read Quran every now and then. So yeah, I think I'm good. I think I deserve to see.
I love that you're saying that, because a lot of people who go through a spiritual or become spiritually aware, or they're still on that journey, they begin to see themselves as better than people who are not on that path.
Well, according to, this is where it gets juicy. According to Hayy, they haven't really been sharpened, because if their mind hasn't been sharpened properly, and
sharpened as in, okay, so they see themselves better,
sharpened as in becoming more
on that path, and then
yeah,
because the way I saw it was like, okay, so it's my journey. Every person has their own journey. If I'm becoming more spiritually aware, it's not my business to judge you and where you are in your life. It's up to you to break your own patterns and shackles, like you mentioned it at the beginning of your thesis.
And if you don't want to, that's if you don't want to and you want to stay at this level, that's really fine. Because I feel like a true person who's seeking the path is not afraid. It's not afraid. Like, it's not afraid to fit in. Not fitting in, or not afraid of not making ends meet. Like, I want to share a story. Can I say?
When he says, before when he refers to sharpening your mind. So when you sharpen your mind, is it you just detach from people's perception?
Like, let's translate it to this. Let's translate it to this day and age. Because Hayy translated it like, do your knowledge because it connects you to God. All right. Now, how can we translate it here, or like in someone who's interested of getting to know themselves, or any topic for this matter? It's very important to sharpen your mind, meaning that it's very important to observe. Like, again, observe the world. Like, I'm not going to stress this enough. Observe yourself, observe your world, observe your mom, observe your dad. Observe how you tend to imitate your mom sometimes, and how your mom tends to be afraid of her mom, or how your dad tends to have this whatever it is that you're like. I don't know your dad, but like, but yeah, like, whatever it is that you might feel through, like, just start observing the world, and sharpening the mind doesn't come from. Well, now that, because a lot of we all have the ability to observe, like, it's a basic instinct. But what's really important is that you take this observation and do not label it. Do not label it. It's very important to not label things.
Because a lot of people, as soon as they start that observation process, labeling automatically kicks in, and then you're back in the mind state of thinking.
We teach in English, especially as when it comes to like how to read, like the reading, like when it comes to reading books, we ask the kids to use the reading strategies. Oh, my cat is, one of the reading strategies that we use tends to be making inferences based on the knowledge that you see and the information that you have. Make predictions and constantly monitor your reading. Meaning what? As you're reading the information, monitor, see the prediction that you did. Was it good or bad? Was it correct, or does it need adjustment? What about the inferences that you made, that you came up? Are they true regarding your reading? If it's yes, then yeah, it's a good inference. Like, you did a good inference. So, like, I think there's 6 traits But I feel these three really strike me as like, this is what we should do with the world. Like we should read it, like use these reading strategies and observe it to it.
It shows that inquiry goes hand in hand with observation.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. The process of inquiry and research and asking questions, and this is very important. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Did you notice? Okay, kids. As much as like I had the pleasure of teaching pre-kindergartens, like 4-year-olds when I was a co-teacher when I first started, and what I observed was such a lovely thing, and I think they tend to. Like genuinely, they tend to really understand abstract ideas. Like if you tell them that there's a monster in the closet, they would believe it. Their mind would go into abstract, but at the same time, they're constantly be asking questions about it, which I love. Like I remember one conversation in which one kid was like, he lost his toy, and he said, well, God took it. And I loved how he integrated it to his own person, like this abstract, very big idea of who God is and what is God. And he just, based on a conversation that he might have heard from his mom, he came up with his own conclusion of who God is. And he's like, well, God, I think God took it. And like, because the toy, I don't know where it was. And he's like, does it happen? And he asked the other time, like, does it happen to you? Like, God took it. It's like, yeah, it happens to me too sometimes.
Wow.
Like, and they have this genuine. Well, I think it goes like I'm not saying like I'm just referring to this example because for any other person, they tend to view who God is or like the unseen as a very abstract idea. But the kids, they tend to not only believe in the abstract, but they tend to really integrate them in their own lives. This is what I've noticed. And not only that, they tend to also be very curious about it in a very spontaneous way. That's like, so okay, what
so beautiful. You're born like that, and then you go through that human learning experience
where you're too good, cool for school, am I right?
And you do shift from that curious inquiry process. A lot of people who are kind of like spiritual mentors do emphasize that you continue to do that, curious inquiry process, to not turn it into this rigid process that's boring, that's dull, to kind of be gentle with it and to humor it and kind of, as they say, romance that process. It's gentle, it needs space.
And you know what is the weird and the weird thing is, once they hit go into KG, they tend to be so rigid now, like 1 year difference. And they tend to be so rigid instead of that spontaneity and that going, because not a lot of people pay attention to toddlers. Like, yeah, I want to make sure that his needs are met, but let him be off in his crazy world, and I will accept whatever crazy thing that he might say or he might ask. So not a lot of people tend to judge toddlers and their questions. So this is why you tend to have this freedom of that like being spontaneous and being curious and just spending hours and hours. Like if you ask the kid at 3-year-old old, like you would see exactly what they want to be when they grow up. Like I remember one kid told me, like we were having the projector on. He's like, I want to be on that screen. Like he knew, like he was such a charismatic kid. He knew exactly what, like he knew that he wanted to talk to people and be on screen. And I love, like, and right now we're going to this battle, like who we are and who we want to be. Like ask a kid about it. I'd be like, I'm doing good today. Or like, I'm happy today. Or like they don't view, what's it called? They don't view that, like they have a very good understanding of who they are more or less and their emotions, but they're still trying to figure out the world.
So and then they're aligned more with their true self, with their soul, with who they are. They're connected to their core inner being.
Because people still accept them. Even their parents, they accept who they are. The only problematic kids that I've seen are more or less, first of all, because they're imitating their parents, like 100%, they take the patterns of their parents and they're imitating them. Or, what's it called? Or there's like, their parents genuinely they're constantly criticizing them. And even though they don't tell her, like, hey, kid, your haircut is bad. But they generally tend to criticize them. So moving forward from that, kids also do not understand time, even though they tend to understand abstract ideas. But when it comes to time, they have a very tough time with it, which I found very interesting. Like they understand today, like night and day. They tend to view the world as night and day, like time, but they don't know what yesterday is and what tomorrow is. And they don't know like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. Their limitation is just genuinely and purely in the present. They don't think ahead.
Yeah.
They really don't.
By the time-space reality, they're very present.
Like I have a deadline that I have to view tomorrow. Like the kid would do it tomorrow, but if you want to be more worried about it. Like we have homework, we give them homework and they do it. But they really don't have this anxiety of, am I meeting it? Am I not meeting it? Is it good? Is it not good? And I just love it. Like living purely in the present and really feeling their emotions and just moving forward with life. And I love that.
So Zeina,
going back
to wrap up and just to circle back to your thesis before we wrap up. How did your education journey contribute to your spiritual journey? Zeina's like, I'm not my master's defense discussion. I'm done with that.
Well, first of all, I want to answer two things. First of all,
contribute to your understanding of the soul.
I picked a major where it allowed me to read. Since I was a kid, I loved reading, and I loved especially stories. I loved stories. I I would even sit with the adults to hear their stories. I genuinely had a knack for stories, and I loved them growing up. And up until it became a burden for me to read, I stopped reading. Like up until that moment. But growing up and up until high school, college, I fell in love with my reading and discussing. And not only that, I have the privilege of discussing these stories that I'm reading with my professors and my classmates. So I genuinely had I loved reading. So I feel like this practice of reading allowed me to more or less practice understanding the world more. Like I had all these different sources. I'm not saying they're I don't know if they're legitimate or not. They could be fictional stories. You can have the Harry Potter series, but more or less they help me to broaden my senses.
Sharpen your mind,
sharpen my mind. I'm not saying again, I don't have an IQ of 100 above. I wish I did. You'll not see me here, but no, I'm kidding. But I noticed that I started to observe patterns more easily because I've seen it in books. I started to relate things much easier because I know a character that has been through this. So I had the world basically in the palm of my hands, listening to all these characters, all these stories, different ideas, different everything. But at the same time, my mom growing up made very sure that I know where I'm coming from. So she really reminded me of she constantly kept doing that. Even though forcefully, she kept reminding me of my roots. My religion, she constantly talked about it. So I had this groundedness with my mom and this openness with the books that I was reading or the worlds that I was reading. So this with my spiritual when I'm not saying I'm spiritually aware because I don't know, but I feel I'm at this moment where I'm giving myself more the space to become who I want to be rather than judge who I want to be. And this was a very important thing for me because I felt constantly what's going on around me and how am I fitting in with the world rather than and I was constantly suffering from this anxiety, but now I feel I'm in the space of, well, I'm here and I am now, and I don't care where Zeina might be in the next few days. I don't care if I'm going to be late. I don't care about what happened in the present. I'm really thankful for everything that happened in the past. And I'm just here. I'm just right now talking to Lulu right now. And this, even though sometimes I might divert myself from that, but this is where I want to get myself back to, because this is where I really truly feel like the space and the freedom of becoming myself. So relating that to my spiritual journey, I felt like reading more helped me with opening my mind to all these ideas and accepting at the same time. So it's very, very quick for me. Like, I viewed myself as a character, and how would I feel about this character, rather than fully integrate and judge myself. So once I had like to take a step back, I viewed myself as a character. All right, Zeina, what do you like? Zeina's feeling like this and feeling like that because of this, and that. So now I'm becoming a main character. Sorry about that. That was weird. Yeah.
I love that. It's so beautiful.
This is, yeah. Thank you. But the ending was not. I'm judging myself right now.
It's very inspiring, Zeina. And honestly, reading your thesis really, you know, like I told you before we started recording, it gives unique insight to the beauty of the soul. And I loved how you combine kind of like different perspectives, different worlds.
Yeah.
And you were able to, you know, bring or extract the essence from these very deep teachings, and simplify it into language that, you know, helped me resonate with the things that I'm going through right now, and helped me gain a deeper understanding of the soul, because it is intimidating when you begin that spiritual journey. You see that you see your soul as something that you like, how will I begin to touch it or get to know it or become more familiar with it? How will I open that door? But through reading your thesis, it really helped me understand, you know, that you will go on that journey. It's not going to be easy. You have to set your expectations. But in the end, like you said, it's part of, you know, you need to focus on observation, be curious, inquire, don't hesitate to ask questions, and really focus on setting pure intentions that's aligned with who and it's up to you to break these shackles and chains, like you said, to reach that level of insight. You know?
And don't get too much lost in information. Like, you'll get educated to the end of time, but as long as it doesn't have a purpose, then it's really futile, because you're so filled with information, but what about the other two that you're not taking care of at the same time? So yeah, I think we can agree.
There's never a dull moment with you, Zeina. We could go on and on talking about the soul and spiritual journey and the journey of self-discovery. If you enjoyed this podcast, please click like and subscribe and share it with your family and friends. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.